Bill, you're on mute. Take two. Welcome, everyone. We'll get started. We have an apology from Alderman Barakis, who's on leave for the election, and Councillor Ewan will be a little bit late, but they should be here shortly. So we have no one to co-opt at this point. We'll move on to item 2, confirmation of the minutes. Someone like to move those? Thanks, Lord Mayor. Any dissent? Declare that carried. Item 3, consideration of supplementary items. We have 2 items in the supplementary agenda. That's moved by Deputy Lord Mayor. I'll put that. Any dissent? No dissent. Carried. Item 4, indications of pecuniary and conflicts of interest. Anyone? Conflicts of interest? There being none, move on to transfer of agenda items. We're good there. Okay. Item 6 is reports. 6.1 is the Hobart Transport Strategy 2030 Implementation Framework. So this is coming from Mr. Noy's division. So I might ask Mr. Noy to give us an introduction to this item.
Yes, thank you. And I will hand over to Louisa Carter, who was instrumental in pulling this together. But Council in 2018 endorsed the key themes of the transport strategy, but didn't necessarily endorse the specific actions. So what we wanted to do with this document is, I suppose, set the, actions into implementation framework that we could seek endorsement from the elected members ultimately after we've had gone out to engagement. To allow us then to proceed with some structure around how we were to introduce the transport strategy. Now, I've got Louisa online, and I'll hand over to Louisa to talk in some detail in relation to the framework and how we propose to the form of it, and how we propose to move forward with, ultimately, importantly, continuing to take action in relation to the transport strategy.
Okay. Thanks very much, Neil. Want to go straight on, Councillor Harvey?
Yep, go on.
So everyone, this part of the transport strategy, which is about implementation, is about taking the very good work that we've done in the past over a series of years and putting that into some messaging and some themes that we've called them platforms in this document, to describe to the community what it is that we're going to do. So those are the 4 platforms. The other thing that underpins this document is that it really takes all of the previous work and says, which is good work, and we are doing all of that work, but a lot of that's in collaboration. We're not necessarily directly responsible for that as City of Hobart. So what we've done with this document is say, well, what are we directly responsible for? And let's say what we're going to do. So that's it. So we've introduced, we're talking about having 4 implementation platforms for the kinds of projects that we'll do in the city. We definitely want better information around how to move in the city, and real-time information, integrated ticketing, and better public transport services and micro-mobility. We definitely need to be City Deal aligned. We want to have connected communities inside of Hobart. And probably one of the most exciting things in this strategy is that, in this framework, is that we want to say there are some streets in the city that we want to focus on and make great streets for the future. And these will be incredible tourism locations going into the future for Hobart. So that's where we've come to. I'm happy to take any questions if needed.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Louisa. I think the plan on the page, implementation framework on a page, is very good. That made things very clear. So I'm very pleased to see that. And welcome, Councillor Ewan. Any comments? I'll go around. Yep, thanks, Deputy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Louisa. Just a couple of queries. So you're saying that this is all focused on the work that we can do, because it wasn't quite clear when it was sort of straying into the transit and what sort of responsibilities we might have there. I just wasn't clear on that platform, if you like.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. As you know, I've had extensive experience in transit with the Brisbane rollout over the last 20 years. As a land use authority, which is City of Hobart's key role in this, we need to be, strong and good collaborators for the vision that we have in the city for where those public transport stations should occur, how often, how far apart they should be, and what are the best places in Hobart to achieve that. So we are collaborators, but we do not control the public transport decisions.
Yeah, no, I obviously understand that, but I thought that there looked like there was more than we could actually control in that part of the document. The other question that I have is in relation to streets. So are they lining up with like the local area management plans and those particular areas that we're talking about? I mean, are they technically streets? Are they roads? Or where specifically are you suggesting?
That's a very good question. So when we talk about great streets, I think where we've got key functions that mean that street has to be very carefully considered. So if we had a transit street, for example, if we wanted to put, or the state was putting bus lanes into a street here in the City of Hobart, we'd need to think about what that street's going to be. Now, if it also shows on the cycling plan, well, we're starting to see how that great street, what functions it's got. And then, of course, as the Land Use Authority, we're really talking about how that street, will grow over time. So the description of the great streets, there might only be one or two. I imagine that we have to spend some fair money to get them done. So, Elizabeth Street would be a natural contender. There would be others.
Okay, so that's more to be done rather than chosen already.
Yes.
So,
sorry,
and just in relation to that sort of.
Sorry, I was just going to say you did touch upon the local area mobility plans, and they are the detailed studies where we're wanting to talk to the community, find out the missing links, see what the future growth is. And in fact, the Central Hobart Precinct Plan is the first one of the catchment studies.
Mm-hmm. And one last question, if I may, Chair, just in relation to Salamanca as a destination, if you like, and Hunter Street, Sullivan's Cove, how does that feature, and how is that looked at differently from the CBD?
That's a great question as well. So what we've done is coming. You'll see on the projects there on the plan on an implementation framework on a page that the destinations. We'll be looking at parking policy and things like that. So we have done a preliminary look around all the other cities in Australia to look at entertainment precincts and other really, like the Rocks, really specialist destinations, and what are the other cities applying. So when it comes to Salamanca, at the moment, and not just Salamanca, all through the city, what we're doing is we kind of have citywide policy and application, and then we fit that to the locality given its bespoke needs. What this framework is trying to do is to indicate to the community, to businesses and others, there is a general structure of the city that we want to get behind. And so for Salamanca, if it's a key destination, 1.2 million visitors into Hobart every year over a resident population of 55,000 and a working population of nearly 60,000 or something. The 1.2 million, for Salamanca, we need to be, on balance, looking at all these things together. So the destination will give it a special status, which helps us from a transport point of view to look at, what are the appropriate commensurate parking rates? What is the road management, the curbside allocations that we need to consider?
Thank you.
Lord Mayor or Councillor Ewan?
I've got.
I've got a big question first, which is I think I've got quite a lot of feedback and suggestions. So I don't know to what extent some of that could be, whether the committee is willing to kind of think about that and whether that can be changed between now and I know we've got quite a while before our council meeting. I'd like to get this out, but I've got there's a couple of issues.
Lord Mayor, just for your benefit, the recommendation at this point in time is not to endorse it, but to acknowledge that it will be going out to key stakeholders in the first instance before we come back. So we've got a little bit of time. If you want to, before we do that, if you wanted to provide that sort of feedback to officers, and that goes for all elected members before we do that.
Is that going to council?
No.
So this isn't going to go to council? Okay.
No.
All right. Well, I don't know. I just want to flag some of the things because the other committee members, I might not agree, or
Okay.
do you just want everybody's? Because I'm just worried that we might all have different. I don't mind. I can give it to you, but there's sort of things like, why is Rest Point Casino a key destination? Why is South Hobart and Ferntree not mentioned on the final page as a local area mobility plan catchment?
Yeah.
South Hobart's just not on there, neither's Ferntree. There's all sorts of bits and pieces. Things like right at the end, the platform projects. I mean, I don't think we need to say that every single thing will necessarily be approved individually by council, because some things might really not be relevant to council or might not have planning or budget. So I don't think we need to sort of promise that in this sort of document. That would be, I think, quite unusual. I'm also just on the issue of the language, because I think, everybody is an expert in transport, so it's really important that these documents are really accessible. And just the sort of implementation framework, and I just wonder why we couldn't call it an implementation plan. And but then in the document we also talk about implementation platforms. So there's just sort of those things that I wonder whether we could call, have an implementation plan and then have focus areas or something that's a little bit more plain English for people, because there's a risk that if it's too much of the sort of, the jargon of professional people, that it's sort of going to look a bit, impractical or something. But yeah, I mean, there are all those kind of bits and pieces. So I guess they are all smaller details rather than major significant things. So if everyone's happy, then I can just feed those sort of bits and pieces in. The other thing is the city deal area. I don't see any value in platform 2 to put the entire city deal, because it's really not relevant to transport implementation. Direct flights, Antarctic and Southern Ocean, collaboration and governance, these kind of things. I think, the city deal piece we need to put in is just really the pieces, that are really relevant to transport and mobility. And there are some good goals in the city deal, and the more we repeat those goals in our own documents, the better, because they actually will hold the state government to something that's quite tangible. So yeah, there's a few bits and pieces like that. But with those comments, if you're happy just for me to sort of pass some of that through, if people are generally comfortable with some of that feedback, then I'll just do it that way.
Of course, Lord Mayor, of course.
Yeah, look, I think I'd prefer to have that rather than try and discuss everything here and now. I don't think we'll get very far.
Yeah,
No.
we're in your hands. I mean, and it was my suggestion as a framework, because in fairness to Louisa, she did have a plan there, but we didn't have any sort of list of projects, significant list of projects. So how can it be a plan without the projects? And as you rightly point out, we don't list all of the projects that we're going to plan to implement. So I was a little bit nervous about calling it a plan, but if you're, as I said, I'm in your hands. If you're happy.
Well, yeah, I guess that does go to a fundamental question is, you know, by this stage, why can't we actually have a plan? And the things that hang off that are maybe not projects, but surely these great streets, informed trips, connected communities, they're initiatives, you know, and we do need to, I think, list up some of the things we think we might be doing, because we've only got basically 9 years before this is all over. So, and of course, projects, you know, will need a budget and would have to come back to council, or would need a, you know, planning approval would need to come back to council. But I think we need to, under the platforms, actually have some identification of initiatives, because, and that's my understanding of what these local area mobility plans are. They actually are, they are initiatives. They are things that we're going to do, aren't they?
But Lord Mayor, I like the idea of a platform, because that, I like the idea of a framework, because that's how we operate this. That's the process within which we discuss these items. So they're not projects. This is the platform that we will discuss each project in. That these are the platforms we will use, but a framework, I think, is quite specific. This is the way we will operate towards these things. So I like the use of the framework personally.
Okay, it's probably just a personal thing. I mean, I think some of that language is very inaccessible, but that's, you know, that's a personal thing.
Well, look, I think feed that through rather than getting bogged down now, and we'll have a look at it again when we've had the feedback from the Tas government, public transport operators, and the peak industry, which are the 3 bodies identified in the report. But we might move on to Councillor Ewan. Did you have anything to add? All right. So I'm quite pleased about where we're at, and it's a lot more condensed than some of the work we've had to date. Which we have a huge body of work around these issues and topics and public transport and things. So is anyone prepared to? Hang on, I'm just looking for the recommendation again. To move the recommendation.
So I will.
I think Anna had. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, Bill. Can I just clarify that it's, okay. So in terms of the stakeholders, peak industry associations, who does that include? And, you know, how about
it'll be
cyclists?
yeah, or RACT. There'll be the freight peak bodies. Those sorts of organisations.
And how about sort of the people, in a sense?
Well, I think what we would want to get is an endorsement from council. This is primarily a briefing of where we've got to at this point in time before we do engage with key stakeholders. Once we've engaged with key stakeholders, we'll come back to you and council for some sort of endorsement for wider engagement. I think we didn't want to necessarily go out with our own thoughts without at least sharing them with the committee, so you can provide some feedback before we do so.
Mm.
Yeah, can I just make a request that it's not too top heavy, that it's not just metro, state growth and the freight, you know, that we do go down to the bicycle network, maybe the
well, they're in it. That's mentioned, the public transport operators.
Sorry, I just saw Tasmanian Government Public Transport Operators Peak Industry Association.
Yeah.
So if that includes some other folks. then
Yeah, certainly it does. Cycling South and Cycling Tasmania, all peak bodies that we would want, including any walking sort of peak bodies as well.
okay.
We'd want
No,
to.
it's just
We'd want to. Yeah.
sorry. Yeah, they're
So-
referred to as Peak Industry Association. So it's probably just a language thing. But if that's what you're thinking of, that's fine. Yeah.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
So the public engagement will be another step in the process later.
That's correct. I think that this is an opportunity to brief committee on what is being proposed. If you are comfortable, I understand that you're providing some feedback before we go out to these peak bodies, and that will then inform us as to, the final draft that we would seek council endorsement to go out to wider community engagement.
Okay. Well, I'm happy with the way you've structured it. We go out to the peak bodies now, the state government, the bigger organisations. We get that feedback, then we take it out for public community engagement rather than doing it all in one foul swoop, which makes it a bit more cumbersome, I think. Yep. Okay. So who's happy? Who wants to move it? Anyone happy to move it? Okay. Thanks, Councillor Ewan. So if there's no further debate, I'll put the item. All those in favour? Any dissent? Okay, I'll declare that carried. Okay, thank you, officers. Item 6.2 is the Campbell Street, Argol Street bicycle connection. So this is a recommendation to go ahead with a pilot or trial of separated bike lanes. Anyone have a comment? Or Mr. Noy, would you like to introduce it?
Yeah, look, this follows on council's decision in the 16th of December 2019, where we first presented this opportunity of, importantly, a connection through the city that links up the northern connection, cycle connection into the city on Argol and Campbell Streets, through to the inner city cycleway and to key institutions within the centre of the city. So this, as I indicated, council endorsed this proposal for consultation with relevant stakeholders. And requested a further report detailing the proposal be provided to council following the public engagement with key stakeholders. Now that has been done. We've presented the outcomes of that feedback. We've made some modifications to the proposal in response to some of that feedback. We've done further extensive modelling. We've done risk assessments. We've done safety assessments around the design. We've engaged with our active transport advisory committee, and we've done an estimate of the cost of the works. For funding requests with state growth. We've lodged submissions for funding, and we're optimistic that we will receive a positive outcome from those applications. So we're ready to go with this trial, and importantly, we've able to demonstrate that the network can accommodate this separated cycleway linkages, and we're excited to be at this point where we can seek your formal endorsement for us to, subject to funding, get on and put this critical piece of cycling infrastructure in place.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Noy. Very exciting. If this goes all the way, Deputy Lord Mayor, you had your hand up.
Yep, happy to move it, Chair, and thanks for all the work. I mean, I think they've worked around those comments pretty well as well. So, and certainly the discussions that we had at the Transport Committee was generally positive.
Very good.
Look, sorry, go on, Lord Mayor.
Oh, look, I'm sorry I wasn't at that meeting, but I'm just looking at the engagement report. And there's a lot of very nitty-gritty bits and pieces about bus stops and TMAG, and I mean, to what extent have those all been kind of sorted out? They don't look like deal breakers, but they're all obviously some. But have you sort of? They don't really. You just say one thing in the report that there was some. It was largely sorted out, but.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, sorry, Lord Mayor. I think there is a matrix of detailed comments and the response we have. Yeah.
It just says what we heard, not what we did in response.
I think that there's a response, but maybe Mr. Baird, if you are on the line, if you'd like to, yeah.
Yes. At the end of the engagement report, there should be a summary of the response points that come back to the.
Yeah, there's a lot, isn't there?
So it's in a. Sorry, I'm just trying to get you the page number here.
Yeah.
I'm in the. I'm in the wrong view, I think.
Concept drawings incorporating relevant feedback. It was.
There we go. It says end of document, and then there is an Excel table, which goes block, concern, and response, and it just goes to a detailed response from officers on those. So it's right at the very end of the engagement report. It is, however, true that there is probably one or two minor things to iron out. There's probably a little bit of bus layover space that we need to work through, and that's in train with state growth, and that sort of relates to larger issues around bus network rejigging with the Southern Services upgrade and what will happen with those services coming online from the park and ride to the south. So it's not incorrect that there is one or two minor details. However, we would see them as minor, and I suppose it is that thing of how far you can take those discussions and negotiations before we have a clear decision from council.
Sure. Another sort of overarching concern that I don't know, again, because I wasn't at the Active Transport Committee, is just whether, the removal of any of the bulbing leaves any sort of areas with sort of too much pedestrian congestion, because I know there's a couple of parts of the city where the bulbing, is needed to deal with, particularly since some of our traffic lights take too long to change. But was that raised, or is that anything you've got, or are you pretty comfortable with that issue?
That issue wasn't raised at the Active Transport Committee. I think on the whole, we feel that the junctions where there are longer wait times, and these would be around Macquarie and Davey Streets in general, the bulbings there are not. We have a lot of space, such as outside the Lord Mayor's office on the Argol Street corridor. There was quite a large amount of space, and we're not impacting, we believe, on that pedestrian holding and carrying capacity there.
Right.
Probably the most sensitive spot is probably in the area adjacent to the hospital. But we're not doing a lot of work there in areas where we think it's impactful to. So up on the Liverpool Street piece, there's nothing really happening there that would impact that crossing ability.
Okay. Alrighty, and just on the cost, I saw there were 3 figures in the report, but I couldn't quite work out which one you were suggesting it was. And are we applying for? What have we applied for?
Okay, so sorry.
You're right. You go, Stuart. You're right.
In larger projects like this, we've tried to move towards the sort of the federal government costing recommendations, and I've put some links in there and some pieces around that. When we do work like this, we can work out some basic costs, but then there's a statistical way of ensuring that you cover off on a whole range of unknown eventualities, because we are working in the city with underground services and we're over a lot of blocks. This is a little bit different to a single site project where we, doing things within a sort of a relatively limited footprint. We're now going up and down a corridor. So this is an accepted methodology which the Commonwealth uses for undertaking road and other transport project costings. And we have applied for the P90 cost estimate at the $1.725 million, which, ensures that all contingencies are covered.
Yeah, so it's about 100,000. Oh, so 1.7 kilometres is 1.7 million.
Correct, but the important thing to note is that the real cost is not known until you've really generated the final detailed design.
Yeah.
And we may well come in under that.
Yeah.
But when we're putting in for funding, funding applications at this size and magnitude without a detailed design to base it off, it's important to run the statistical sort of side of things to make sure that we have anticipated what the costs really could turn into, so we don't get caught short, so to speak.
Okay. And the it's going to be so important that we actually get the numbers, isn't it, that are using it for the. How long do you propose the trial to be for, and how will we sort of know whether we've succeeded?
Well, look, it's I think the council resolution is for 12 months, but I think, given the extent of works that we would need to do to put it, set it in place, I think realistically we'd want at least 24 months, 2 years to test it. So trial it. But look, this is importantly, this connects into the Rose Garden Bridge, so into the city as well, and we know people do use that. So, and it's a secure, safe route that we can get in relatively quickly, with minimal dislocation of parking necessarily for the whole day, so we can maintain some parking, which people do like to maintain, and importantly too, this is the route where there'll be significant university student activity in future years, maybe not within those 2 years necessarily, but we do know that some of the there will be greater student numbers in the city even this year as a result of some changes that the university have already made.
Councillor Ewan, did you have any comments?
No, thanks. There was a lot of reading, and thank you very much for giving that to me this week.
Right. Okay. The recommendation's been moved by Deputy Lord Mayor. So I'll put the recommendation that we go ahead with this trial, and we take that motion to the full council. Any dissent? No dissent. I'll declare that carried. We've got a couple of items in supplementary. So could I have a motion that we move to the supplementary, please? First hand up. Thanks, Councillor Ewan. So we'll go to the supplementary, item 11, and we'll ask Mr. Doyle to join us. So item 11 is the proposed fees and charges, cleansing and solid waste, roads and capital works, stormwater. Would you like to give us a brief introduction?
So, Chairman, this is the annual results of the annual review of a series of fees and charges. As the report suggests, we've looked at cleansing and solid waste, which deals with all our waste management charges and the like, the provision of wheelie bins and other bins, various road management charges, and also those associated with stormwater service connections and inspections. I'm happy to take any questions committee might have.
Any questions, Mr. Doyle? So I'm happy with the little rises in the fees. Everyone's fine? All right, I'll put that item 11.
Sorry, can I ask?
Yep, go on. Yep.
You've got a table there, Mr. Doyle, in 7.2.1. So there's an expected decrease in a couple of areas.
Yes, and
That, please.
thank you, Lord Mayor. We've done two things this year. We've had a really careful look at both the quantum of the fees and charges that we are applying, but also a close look at what we expect to recover in terms of revenue. And what we did identify in the roads and stormwater area that previously our expectations were optimistic, and we were not meeting previous budgets. So we've actually, in some areas, the individual fees actually gone up, but our expected revenues come down, and it's more to do with some improved accuracy in our budgeting rather than any impact as a result of the application of the fee.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, well, I'll put item 11. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, any dissent? No dissent. I'll declare that carried, and that'll go to the full council. Item 12, fees and charges, City Planning Division, residential parking, permits, traffic strategy and projects. Any comments there to introduce the item, Mr. Doyle?
This is one. This is one for me. But I'll save Mr. Doyle that task. But yeah, look, I think the more significant fee increases do relate to road closures within the CBD. We're suggesting that they significantly increase and reflect more the I suppose the disturbance to traffic movement and people movement through the CBD that these closures do result in. So we feel that should the fees should more accurately reflect those costs to the community more generally, and I think importantly focuses the attention on construction firms and developers, their attention to minimising that disruption that come about during these significant and long-term road closures. For example, Murray Street, we had footpath closed on that site, Parliament Square for 3 or 4, nearly 3 years. So, and that may have been a factor of the fees that were being charged. So we think that focusing their attention on minimising that disruption through these fees is a justifiable approach.
Okay, I'm happy with the fees, the changes. Any dissent to this?
Yeah, can I just
Sorry, Chair, who was the mover of that item, please?
We haven't had a mover, I don't think. Would someone like to move it? Thanks, Councillor Ewan.
Can I just ask where that's reflected in the? I'm actually looking at these tables. So it's the last. Is it the last traffic strategy and projects table?
Yes, that's correct, and it's long-term. It's a second fee down. Long-term construction occupation of public highway within the CBD.
So that's $10.
Per square metre per week.
Okay. And how does that compare to, you know, Adelaide or Perth or those sort of ones?
Ooh, Louisa, are you able?
Yes. Lord Mayor, we did do a comparison with other cities, which was how we selected which parts of it we might adjust. And we're pretty, my previous manager had that pretty commensurate. There were just a few exceptions based on cost to council, residence parking permit being one of those in the yellow line. So yeah, with this one, we did benchmark it against other cities and actually, you know, noticed that there was this kind of disincentive. There was both the incentivizing of the economy, but also managing, you know, the impacts on other businesses, as Mr. Noy has said.
Yeah, so $10 is pretty.
Yeah, they're very similar. Yeah.
Okey-doke. Good.
All right. Okay, I'll put the item, no dissent. Okay. Kind of a motion that we move back into the main agenda. Thanks, Councillor Ewan. So now we're back to
I'll move the status report. Be received.
okay. Yep. No, it's just not rolling. Okay. All right. Any questions with the status report? Being none. Okay, I'll put that. Thanks, Councillor. Deputy Lord Mayor, any dissent? No? Okay. Item 8 is responses to questions without notice. There's several there, but not for discussion. Would someone like to move those? Thanks, Councillor Ewan. Any dissent? No dissent. Carried. Item 9, questions without notice. Any questions?
Yep.
Go on, Lord Mayor.
There was a question I asked in September 2020 about building site hoardings. I guess, again, looking at whether we're up to scratch with what's common practice in other capital cities. And I've just been so I won't go into the detail, let's just ask the question. Is it, and in the response to that question, it did say that a report is being prepared for consideration of the committee for the review of blah, 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 blah. The report will be presented to committee on or before the first quarter of 2021. I'm just wondering, given we're pretty much at that point, when that report might be coming forward.
Neil, would you like me to talk to that? Okay. Lord Mayor, yes, we have done quite a lot of work on this. We've just got a couple of the products coming out ahead. I think it will come next month. We've done all the comparison with other cities and what they've got going. And, you know, like in Sydney, it's quite an extensive policy. We don't necessarily need to go there, but we've spoken, Neil and I, that, you know, we could have a look at that and see what can happen. So that's what's going to happen in the next month, hopefully.
Next month. Okay, great. And do you know whether that will have to, are we different in terms of things like wind and having solid hoardings or just these kind of gates that people seem to use?
Yeah, all that has to be checked. I don't see it as particularly difficult. I mean, the actual hoardings themselves have to have the structural integrity. What we're talking about is the aesthetic treatment and the arrangements. Yeah, I think it'll be okay.
Okay. Another question, if I can. So another question I asked in August 2020 was whether, you know, how common is it in other states, in particular capital cities, for large vehicles to be not allowed to travel during peak times? And I just didn't feel that question answered that question. It just set out the basic rules, but it didn't provide that understanding of whether other cities, our contemporaries in the capitals, do that. It's quite relevant to this discussion around the 5th lane on the southern outlet. So I guess my question is...
You're on mute, Louisa.
Would you mind having another
Lord
look?
Mayor, we are yet to do that work.
Okay. So I guess my question is, could I sort of re-ask it in a way?
I think we didn't pick up, my apologies, that it was a comparative study that you were requesting. Yeah, and we definitely do that bit. I'm happy to do that.
All right. Okay. There being no further questions, can I have a motion that we move into the closed, please? Thanks, Councillor Ewan. Any dissent? No. Okay, we'll move into